I was 42 years old, a successful architectural engineer named David Chen, and I thought I had everything. A thriving career, a beautiful home, and Eleanor, my wife of 12 years, a high-end real estate broker, who was by all accounts my partner. But for the last 8 months, something had been subtly shifting. Eleanor suddenly developed an intense focus on self-improvement. It started with expensive yoga classes, escalated to personal life coaches, and culminated in a series of exclusive, remote wellness retreats she insisted were necessary for stress management. She became emotionally distant, always preoccupied, claiming she needed space to find herself. I mistook her withdrawal for deep introspection. In late November, she left for the Serenity Point Resort, an ultra-exclusive location deep in the mountains of Colorado, supposedly for a week of silent meditation and detox.
I missed her terribly. I decided to surprise her. I packed a small bag, bought a ridiculously expensive bouquet of flowers, the kind she loved, and drove 5 hours, navigating winding, heavily secured roads. I wanted to see her face light up when she realized I'd come to whisk her away for a quiet weekend together. I was nervous, yes, but mostly excited about rekindling the intimacy that had been missing. The moment I approached the compound, however, my excitement curdled into unease. This wasn't a rustic, spiritual sanctuary. It was a fortress. The security gates were massive, manned by guards who looked more like former special forces than mindfulness gurus. It screamed extreme wealth and extreme privacy. I parked my car a discreet distance away, intending to walk the rest of the way and announce myself at the main lodge. But as I rounded a thicket of pines, I saw it. A completely unmarked, pristine private airstrip adjacent to the resort grounds. A detail that made absolutely no sense for a stress management facility catering to relaxation. Why would a retreat need a runway capable of handling heavy jets? It felt profoundly wrong. My hands, which had been clutching the bouquet, started to sweat. I realized that whatever Eleanor was doing here, it was not about stress management. It was about something hidden, something requiring a swift, discreet exit. The true surprise, I realized, was going to be mine. I quickly retreated to my car, abandoning the flowers on the floorboard. The knot in my stomach tightened as I pulled out the compact binoculars I kept in my glove box, a habit from my days surveying remote building sites. I parked further back, utilizing the dense foliage for cover, and focused on the airstrip activity. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. There was a vehicle waiting, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Ghost, idling silently near the tarmac. The waiting aircraft wasn't a small propeller plane. It was a Gulfstream G650, one of the fastest, most luxurious private jets in the world. I could see the tail number clearly, N777VS. I immediately filed that number away, a small, clinical detail to hold on to while my emotional world started to spin. Then she appeared. Eleanor. But this wasn't the Eleanor who left wearing comfortable, slightly worn yoga pants and a promise to turn off her phone. This Eleanor was radiant, dressed in tailored designer resort wear, complete with sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She wasn't carrying a worn copy of a self-help book. She was carrying a sleek, small travel bag that looked brand new. And then I saw the man with her.
Even from a distance, even through binoculars, I recognized him instantly. Victor Sterling. The Victor Sterling. The Silicon Valley trillionaire, founder of Omnitech, whose face graced every major business magazine. He was older than me, impeccably dressed, and he held Eleanor's elbow with a proprietary intimacy that made my blood run cold. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was a high-profile client she was selling a property to. No, she was supposed to be meditating. I watched them walk toward the jet, their body language far too relaxed and familiar for a professional relationship. They paused at the boarding steps. I adjusted the focus, desperately trying to catch any words. Victor Sterling leaned in, his voice slightly muffled but audible in the quiet mountain air. The paperwork is finalized, my dear. No loose ends. Next stop, the Cayman Islands. The paperwork is finalized.
Those 4 words were the bullet that went straight through the 12 years of my marriage. This wasn't an affair born of momentary weakness. This was calculated, This was a plan, an 8-month journey of self-improvement that was, in reality, a meticulously planned financial exit strategy tied directly to a literal trillionaire. My wife was leaving me for extreme wealth, and she was already finalizing the financial transfer. That moment when you know something's off but can't prove it yet, when the suspicion gives way to devastating certainty. If you've ever been there, hit subscribe. What I discovered next changed everything, because I was not going to let this calculated deception stand. I watched, frozen, as they embraced, a deep, lingering hug, certainly not appropriate for business partners, and then boarded the G650. The cabin door closed silently. Within minutes, the powerful engines roared to life, and the jet accelerated down the private strip, lifting off and vanishing into the clear mountain sky, heading, presumably, toward the Cayman Islands. My first instinct, the primal, emotional one, was to drive to the main lodge, find her luggage, and demand answers, to scream about the years we built, the promises we made. But the sound of Victor Sterling's words echoed in my head. The paperwork is finalized. No loose ends. Eleanor wasn't just cheating. She was executing a plan. If I interrupted her now, emotionally and blindly, I would be playing right into her hands. I had to be strategic. I had to become the architectural engineer again, methodical, precise, and focused on documentation. I took a deep, shuddering breath and pulled out my phone. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I used the camera to capture high-quality video and photos of the scene, the Rolls-Royce, the jet taking off, the timestamp on the videos. I had the tail number, N777VS. Back in my hotel room later that night, I cross-referenced it, confirming its registration to a complex holding company known to shield Victor Sterling's assets. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a connection. The drive home was silent, but my mind was screaming. I replayed the last 8 months, noticing every subtle financial inconsistency, every sudden business trip that coincided with a location near one of Sterling's known residences. I realized I had been living next to a stranger, a highly skilled actress who had been preparing to discard me like an old blueprint. My heartbreak was quickly being replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. I was dealing with premeditated financial abandonment. I knew I couldn't navigate this alone. The very next morning, I contacted the most highly recommended divorce attorney in the city, specializing in the protection of high-asset individuals against marital fraud. I presented him with the photos, the tail number, and the timeline. I committed myself fully to the strategic approach. I would not allow emotion to cost me my future. Most people would have exploded right there on that tarmac. If you respect the strategic approach and the decision to gather facts first, tap that like button. The attorney, Marcus Thorne, was a man of steel gray hair and ruthless efficiency. He confirmed my worst fears almost immediately. "David," he said, reviewing the initial financial snapshot I provided, "Eleanor hasn't been preparing for a divorce for 8 months. She's been preparing for a financial takeover." We immediately began reviewing joint accounts. The large transfers I had dismissed as real estate investments or retreat fees were actually highly unusual maneuvers. Over the past 8 months, Eleanor had systematically targeted assets that were previously liquid, our savings, mutual funds, and even some stock options, moving them into complex, untraceable accounts, or purchasing high-value, easily concealable assets, like rare art, that were often excluded from marital property calculations in initial filings. She was emptying the well before she announced the drought. But the most devastating discovery was the life insurance policy. We had a joint whole life policy, and she had secretly updated it 3 months ago. The beneficiary was no longer me. It was her sister, Clara, a woman who lived in another state and had never been close to Eleanor. Thorne explained the likely maneuver. Clara was a proxy. Once the divorce was finalized, the assets would be transferred back to Eleanor or even directly to Sterling without a direct paper trail leading from Eleanor to Victor. It was a calculated, cold-blooded maneuver designed to ensure I received nothing. To confirm the full scope of the deception, we brought in Mr. Stone, a former FBI investigator specializing in white-collar crime and digital forensics. Mr. Stone was quiet, meticulous, and terrifyingly effective. Within a week, he confirmed that Eleanor's retreats were not random wellness spots. They were strategically chosen locations. Aspen, Santa Barbara, Miami, all within close proximity to Victor Sterling's documented business hubs or secondary residences. Then came the email. Mr. Stone managed to pull digital remnants from an old cloud backup. It was an email from Eleanor to Victor Sterling's personal assistant, dated 11 months prior, 3 months before her self-improvement journey began. The subject line was chillingly mundane. Meeting to discuss the 5-year plan. 5 years. This wasn't a sudden romance. This was a long-term, calculated strategy. She didn't just meet Victor Sterling. She planned her escape, step by step, starting nearly a year ago, using our marriage as a stepping stone to extreme wealth. The realization that every kind word, every anniversary celebration, every shared memory of the last year had been a lie, a performance designed to keep me docile while she prepared her exit, was physically sickening. Yet, I remained outwardly calm. Emotion was a luxury I could no longer afford. My resolve hardened into ice.
I was no longer seeking revenge. I was seeking justice against premeditated financial abandonment. That moment when everything clicks into place and you realize the truth. Drop a comment if you've experienced that awful clarity when you saw the premeditation. With the evidence mounting, we formalized Operation Clean Sweep. Marcus Thorne and Mr. Stone became my strategic command center. My objective was simple: prove premeditation and marital waste to legally neutralize Eleanor's claims, specifically safeguarding my substantial 401k and the equity in our primary residence, which I had purchased before the marriage. The first step was digital surveillance. I authorized Mr. Stone to place a legal GPS tracker on Eleanor's secondary phone, a burner she used exclusively for communication with Victor Sterling, which we had discovered tucked away in a seldom-used desk drawer.
We also tracked her car, preparing for the moment she would make her next move. I had to maintain the facade of the loving, slightly clueless husband. When Eleanor returned from her detox, looking suspiciously well-fed and tanned for someone who had been fasting, she played the role of the exhausted Zen wife perfectly. She talked about finding inner peace and how much she appreciated my support. I smiled, nodded, and played along, all while Mr. Stone was feeding me real-time updates on her secret movements. To gather audio evidence, I started subtly mirroring her behavior. I began taking long work calls in my home office, leaving a high-quality, legally permissible digital recorder running in the background. The hope was that she would become complacent and confirm her plans or boast about her future to a friend or colleague she thought she could trust.
This dual life was exhausting, but the alternative, losing everything to a calculated lie, was worse. If you want more deep dive stories about people who turn the tables on betrayal using strategy and evidence, the membership gives you access to content that goes even further. We had a timeline for serving the papers, the exact moment she attempted her next major financial move, which we anticipated would be meeting her personal financial advisor to finalize asset liquidation. The tracker was our eyes. The trap tightened swiftly. Mr. Stone delivered the final crucial pieces of evidence. The GPS tracker showed a pattern of repeated, secret visits to Victor Sterling's Manhattan penthouse. The photographic evidence was undeniable.
Eleanor entering the penthouse late at night, leaving early in the morning, confirming cohabitation and an established ongoing relationship, not just a casual affair. More importantly, the audio recordings paid off. One afternoon, while I was supposedly on a conference call, Eleanor was speaking on the phone, clearly unaware the recorder was active. Her voice was dismissive, cold. "The house is just a stepping stone, darling. I'm done with the suburbs and the small-time architecture crowd. The timing is perfect for the next phase. David is so oblivious, it's almost sad." Hearing her reduce our life to a stepping stone was a final, necessary emotional amputation. Marcus Thorne reviewed the complete evidence package.
The photos of the jet boarding, the tail number ownership, the financial transfers, the insurance policy change, the 5-year plan email, the cohabitation photos, and the audio confirming premeditation and contempt. He confirmed we were ready. "David, this is watertight. We can counter any alimony claims and potentially secure sanctions for marital waste.
We file tomorrow. My emotional state was calm, precise. I felt less like a betrayed husband and more like a sniper preparing for the final shot. I organized the confrontation for the following evening at our home where she would be unable to flee or manipulate a public scene. I wanted to deliver the papers in a moment of maximum controlled impact. I've pinned something in the first comment that might help if you're navigating a difficult relationship situation and need to document everything strategically. It's the blueprint I wish I'd had 8 months ago. The next evening, I waited. Eleanor arrived home late, humming, carrying a small, expensive gift bag, likely a token from Victor Sterling. She dropped her keys on the counter and immediately started talking, setting her narrative. "Oh, David, I had such a tough day closing that deal downtown. We really need to talk about our financial future. I've been thinking maybe it's time to restructure some of our assets, make them work harder for us." She was initiating the conversation, preparing to lay the groundwork for her eventual, feigned, reluctant decision to leave. I cut her off, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "We don't need to restructure anything, Eleanor. You've already done plenty of restructuring." She frowned, confused by my tone. "What are you talking about?" I walked over to the dining table and placed a thick manila file in front of her. The sound was heavy, final. "I'm talking about this," I said, opening the file to the first page. It was a high-resolution print of her, radiant in designer clothes, boarding Victor Sterling's Gulfstream G650. Her composure shattered instantly. Her face went white, the humming stopped, and her eyes darted from the photo to me. "David, wait, I can explain. I saw you, Eleanor, at Serenity Point. I drove 5 hours to surprise the wife who was supposedly managing her stress. Instead, I saw you finalizing the paperwork with a trillionaire and flying off to the Cayman Islands." She immediately shifted into denial, the high-end real estate broker mode. "He's a client, a massive investor. We were closing an offshore deal for a property in the Caribbean." I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned the page. "Is he also a client when you spend the night in his Manhattan penthouse? Mr. Stone has excellent telephoto lenses." Her denial faltered. She grabbed the photos, her hands trembling. "You hired a private investigator? How dare you invade my privacy?" "You forfeited your right to privacy the moment you started planning my financial ruin 11 months ago," I countered, the architect of the counterplan now executing the final phase. I played the audio recording, the conversation where she called our life a stepping stone. The sound of her own dismissive voice filled the room. Then I pushed the stack of divorce papers across the table. "You wanted a financial restructuring? Here it is. I filed this morning. Premeditated abandonment, marital waste, and documented infidelity with Victor Sterling. You won't be controlling the assets, Eleanor."
I already have the court order protecting my 401k and the house equity based on the evidence of your calculated plan. The surprise I planned for you was nothing compared to the one I delivered. She didn't cry for our marriage. She didn't express regret for the betrayal. Her panic was purely professional and financial. Victor can't know about this. This will ruin my standing. You can't. If this moment of justice gave you any satisfaction, the super thanks button is right there. It helps me bring more of these stories of strategic survival. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal, precisely because we had overwhelming evidence of premeditation. Eleanor's attorney tried to argue for a standard 50-50 division and substantial alimony, painting her as the victim of a controlling husband, but Marcus Thorne methodically presented the timeline. The 5-year plan email, the systematic movement of assets over 8 months, the documented cohabitation with Victor Sterling, and the changes to the life insurance policy naming her sister as a proxy. The court saw through the facade. The judge agreed that Eleanor's actions constituted a calculated plan of financial abandonment and marital waste. The final consequence was exactly what we had planned for. I retained my 401k entirely, secured the primary residence equity, and Eleanor received a substantially reduced settlement, barely enough to cover the legal fees he was racking up trying to fight the inevitable. The alimony claim was eliminated entirely due to the proof of her premeditation and the financial opportunism tied to Victor Sterling.
The professional fallout was immediate and severe. In the high-end real estate world, reputation is everything. When the details of the case inevitably leaked, the G650, the Cayman Islands, the trillionary connection, Eleanor's exclusive client base started to evaporate. No one wanted a broker whose personal life was a public spectacle of calculated deceit. And Victor Sterling? He was a master of self-preservation. His legal team issued a brief, cold statement confirming he had no knowledge of Miss Chen's marital status and that his relationship with her was purely professional. He abandoned her publicly and completely, confirming that Eleanor was nothing more than a temporary high-value commodity he was willing to discard the moment she became a liability. The cost of the investigation was significant, yes, but when I compared the total fees paid to Mr. Stone and Marcus Thorne against the hundreds of thousands of dollars I would have lost had I waited for Eleanor to file first, the investment was exponentially worth it. I paid for my peace, my future, and my justice. Everything about documentation, evidence gathering, and legal protection is covered in what I've pinned in the comments. Worth checking out if you want the blueprint for navigating these legal battles. 1 year later, the scent of fresh paint permeated my home. I had spent the year rebuilding, not just the house, but my life. I renovated the spaces Eleanor never liked, replacing the cold, minimalist design she favored with warmth and light. My architecture career was thriving. The newfound focus and confidence had led to my biggest commission yet. My self-improvement journey looked nothing like Eleanor's fake wellness retreats. Mine involved hard work, therapy, and learning to trust my own instincts again. I learned the difference between true internal peace and the superficial luxury Eleanor had chased. My true self-improvement was learning self-protection and self-reliance. I saw Eleanor once, unexpectedly, downtown near a low-profile office building. She was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, talking urgently on her phone. The radiance was gone. She looked stressed, diminished, and aged by the failure of her scheme. She didn't see me, and I kept walking. The sight brought me no joy, only a quiet confirmation that calculated deception rarely leads to lasting happiness. Her gamble for extreme wealth had failed, leaving her with the consequences of her own making. The strategic preparation allowed me to move past the betrayal without bitterness. I wasn't consumed by anger. I was focused on security, financial and emotional. I didn't waste months in paralyzing grief. I spent those months building an impenetrable case that allowed me to exit the marriage with my dignity and my assets intact. I learned that betrayal is painful, but being prepared for it is empowering. Stories like this, of people who survived devastating betrayal and came out stronger, they matter. If this one mattered to you, a super thanks keeps them coming. What I learned in that cold Colorado mountain air was the central truth of my experience. Trust your instinct and document everything. Eleanor's 8-month journey wasn't about finding herself. It was about maximizing profit through deceit. It was never about love, not even for Victor Sterling. It was about assets and access. The power I felt wasn't in revenge, but in control. I didn't react blindly. I responded strategically. I had a professional team, irrefutable evidence, and a legal plan executed with precision. That is how justice is achieved in these situations, through preparation, not emotion. I am stronger and wiser now. I know that the greatest betrayal is not what someone does to you, but what you allow them to take from you. I allowed Eleanor to take 12 years of my life, but I refused to let her take my future or my financial security. The surprise I planned for her was nothing compared to the surprise I delivered. Always be the one who knows more than you let on.